Good evening, everyone. It's Tony here from Lockster Reads, day 3 of Remembrance Reads. I have been plodding along with the same books as I was reading at the beginning. I have read part 3, no, part 2, part 3, sorry. My brain is just not working very well. I've read part 3 of in parenthesis, the chapter that is entitled Starlight Order, and begins with a quote from the Gododin. Men went to Catrice, familiar with laughter, the old, the young, the strong, the weak. This one takes us with John Ball and his colleagues through the from up to the front line, basically. It's the story of a long march which gets progressively more disturbing, more frightening, and more poetic. I think the thing I've noticed on this read is that each of the this could change with the next sections, but it seems to get more poetic and more literary. That's not even the right word, I don't think, but as you go through each section, there is a sort of aura of disturbingness in part 3. You get the signs of what the war really means without anybody dying, and it talks about, there's a line that I remember actually, it's sort of echoed a bit in the Paul Fussell book as well. There's a line which is, they bright whiten all this sepulchre with powdered chloride of lime. It's a perfectly sanitary war, which is one of the more sarcastic lines. This is when I think it's really steps up a gear, and is becoming a really great poem. And it ends with John Ball on watch for a couple of hours, and it talks about, there's a great bit of this is the bit I want to read as well. You can hear the silence of it. You can hear the rat of no man's land rut out intricacies, weasel out his patient workings, scrut, scrut, scrut. Harrow out earthly, trowel his cunning paw, redeem the time of our uncharity to sap his own amphibious paradise. You can hear his carrying parties rustle our corruptions through the night weeds, contest the choicest morsels in his tiny conduits, bead-eyed feast on us, by the rule of his nature, at night feast on the broken of us. Which I think is just creepy and brilliant writing. So I've read that. I am now on page 128 of Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. I am really enjoying this, but it is more, I think, a romance novel set. Well, not romance. It's a sort of romance novel set with the World War as its setting. Although I'm beginning to get the perception that this is not going to end well. I have highlighted a couple of quotes for the first time. I am getting used to the writing style, which I'm beginning to enjoy. I don't think I'm going to be a massive Ernest Hemingway fan. I suspect I like my writing a little bit more, with a bit more frippery, but maybe it's just I'm not used to it. I'm enjoying this. I am looking forward to. So I'm about a third of the way through, I'd say, give or take. But yes, I'm enjoying this. Which on the basis of the first couple of chapters I wasn't sure. It's basically the story of an American who is serving with the Italian army as an ambulance driver, as a medic, as a medical as office, as a yeah, in and around the ambulances, um, and um, the story and he's met a British nurse called Catherine Barkley. I should write these things down. Really, these videos would be much better if I did. And they have, well, initially it didn't seem to be love, but he seems to have fallen in love now. And there's a quote about Miss Barkley. Where is it? From the Italian officers that says, "Here you go. I will send Miss Barkley. You're better with her without me. You are purer and sweeter. I'll go to hell. I will send her, your lovely, cool goddess, English goddess. My God, what would a man do with a woman like that except worship her? What else is an English woman good for?" That's one in the eye for you English women out there. And I also finished part 2 of Paul Fussell's book. The Great War and Modern Memory. I don't know why I had such a problem remembering that title there. Part 2 is called The Troglodyte World, and it covers sort of a few different areas and looks at them from a sort of the impact on the literature. One is the trenches. 2 is sunrise and sunset. 3 is ridiculous. It's basically called Ridiculous Proximity, and the 4th one is Will It Ever End? Now, the trenches is all about obviously the impact of fighting in trenches, in fields, in mud, in wet. And I mean, the points. One of the things that I think we sometimes forget is how vast the trench network was. Fussell calculates that it was about 20. If you count Allied and German lines, it was about 25,000 miles of trenches, and it wasn't just one line of trench. And the China trenches went from the Swiss border to the sea in Belgium and France. And it wasn't just one line of trenches. There was always a line behind and a line behind that. And people made their way to the front line of the trenches at night, down roads that were shelled and attacked. That's what David Jones, the second part of David Jones, talks about. And it talks about the sort of, I mean, and also the fact that 7,000 officers and men were killed and wounded in the British trench areas, which were mainly Ypres and the Somme, every single day. 7,000 killed and wounded. Every day, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And the points out that being shelled was the sort of main work of an infantry soldier, both in the First World War and the Second World War, really. It also talks about the lice and the rats, and the smell. It is hard to picture. Picture is not the right word, obviously, because you're talking about smell. It's hard to sniff out what the actual smell would have been like. I've read you the little quote from David Jones about lime. He talks about Paul Fussell talks about the lime thing as well. But there were unburied corpses of men and horses. They became part of trenches and just were left to rot. So the smell must have been absolutely foul. He mentions that one British officer used to use smelling salts to try and keep the smell out of his nose. And he talks about how odd it is that the soldiers would eat 3 meals a day, surrounded by this stench. But he talks about that, and then he talks about the sunrise and sunset and how important it was, and how much it is part of World War One literature, because the British Army at dawn, just before dawn until dawn was dawned, and at night as the sun went down, British soldiers in the trenches had to stand too, which meant they stood on at the front of the trenches to watch, just because those were the times when attacks usually went in from the Germans. So they would stand there and watch. And obviously, what that meant was they saw every sun, every dawn, and every dusk, and that obviously has an impact on you. And he talks about the fact that in Britain, sunsets and sunrises weren't a big thing, particularly until John Ruskin's Modern Painters series, and there's a section in that called "Of the Open Sky," which apparently had a massive influence on British art and literature. And even by 1914, even though this book was written in the 1850s, it had a continuing influence on British art and literature, and had sort of infested how people saw those things, and therefore it becomes an important part of writing about World War One. And then Ridiculous Proximity is basically they were fighting a war 70 miles from London, which meant there was some weirdness there in terms of how quickly you could get back to England if you were on leave. The fact that you got post at the front lines, not just letters, and within 4 days on average, which makes the present post office. Actually, that's an unfair comparison, but the 4 days, and not just letters, but you get food sent to you. People got sent cakes that would arrive not destroyed generally. They got sent clothes. They got sent. He mentions the fact that Wilfred Owen left 2 towels behind at home when he came back from leave, and he got them posted to him on the front line. It seems mad, but there's also the fact that the sound in like Kent and Sussex, you could hear the artillery bombardments from the British sectors during World War One when they were at their highest, and that again is an odd thing and he talks about actually that perhaps Thomas Hardy's poem. There's a Thomas Hardy poem that talks about hearing cannons off the coast. I can't remember what the poem's called. I will check it. Which was written before World War One, but is sort of very preemptive of what you could hear. And all these things, and then Will It Ever End is really just about the fact that people had begun to think that this war would go on forever, and would never end. And actually, there's an argument to be had that World War One and World War Two are one long war. It's just the middle bit, the 1918 to 1939 bit, was more a lot more small scale adjustment wars than and revolutions and civil wars before it picked up again in 1939. In fact, there's a quote I'm going to read, which is he says at the end of that chapter, literally the last sentence of the chapter is, "Thus the drift of modern history domesticates the fantastic and normalises the unspeakable, and the catastrophe that begins this is the Great War." And looking here in 2025, looking at American presidents blowing up boats off Venezuela without any bothering to find out whether they're bad guys or good guys. Gaza, Sudan, these things still happen, and we're still normalising the unspeakable. But I won't go into that now because this is about to be 15 minutes long, which wasn't intended to be. But that's what I read today. All very enjoyable. And I hope to see you all tomorrow. I've been doing one of these every day. I'm not sure how long I will be able to keep up doing one of these every day, and I don't know if they're of any interest to anybody. But we plod on, and hopefully I will speak to you all tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye bye.